So the Laowa Ranger cinema zoom lenses, I've been playing with these for probably the past 6 weeks now, and I absolutely love these lenses. But there was one person that commented on one of my Instagram posts and said, bro, why are you wasting so much money on these lenses when you can just get G-Master lenses? And it's just, it kind of ticked me, and I was like, well, hang on a minute. He obviously doesn't understand the reason behind why you would actually buy a professional cinema zoom lens as opposed to a stills lens. And one of the major reasons is this is PL mount, so this can actually be adapted to pretty much any camera out there. And G-Master lens is obviously a Sony E mount, so you can only literally put them on Sony cameras and you can't put them on any other camera. But there are so many build quality differences between these two that actually suit cinematographers than obviously stills photographers. And this is what we really have to dive into first to show the differences between cinema zooms as opposed to photography zooms. But we're obviously going to go over the image quality and pretty much what you get out of these lenses, and obviously, are they worth your money? Now, the chapters will be below because we do have a lot to get through, so we can compare the cinema zooms to photography zooms, and then we can also look at the image quality that you're going to get out of these lenses. So the Venus Optics Laowa Ranger full frame cinema lenses comes in at a 28 to 75 millimeters and 75 to 180 millimeter focal lengths. They have a constant aperture of T2.9 to a T22. They have an 11 aperture blade diaphragm, a 77 millimeter front filter thread, a 0.8 gear pitch, a 270 degree focus throw, and a 100 degree zoom rotation. They come in PL or Canon EF mount, and they come in at a total of $5,799 US for the set, or $2,999 US each. So first of all, the biggest differences between the cinema zoom and a photography zoom is the build quality. These are generally metal. They are much more rugged when it comes to that build. Photography lenses are designed to be light because obviously they're designed to be handheld and portable when it comes to so many other different situations. Whereas cinema zooms, you're generally putting this on a rig, you're putting it on an easy rig, you're putting it on an RE Trinity, whatever you need to put it on. They don't have to be lighter to save the cinematographer. They can be as heavy as you physically want them to be. And now the key differences between this one and a photography lens are the gear rings. Now this is a massive one because there's a gear ring on the aperture, the zoom, and obviously the focus as well, which is the major one. This has a 270 degree focus throw, and essentially if you are attaching focus motors onto here, you're going to be hitting that spot that you actually want to hit, whereas photography lenses, you're based on a fly-by-wire. So the focus ring isn't physically attached to the elements inside, it's pretty much attached via wire. And the great thing is with the 28 to 75 and the 75 to 180, the aperture, zoom, and the focus ring are in the exact same spot. So if you do want to quickly change these out and leave your focus motors in that exact same spot, it's going to be so much more seamless and easier to change over. Now, one of the great things about cinema zooms is their ability to be parfocal. So essentially parfocal, if you're at 180 millimeters and you focus on a point, then you actually zoom out to 75 millimeters. That focal point is going to be in the exact same spot, so you don't actually have to adjust your focus. Now, cinema lenses, when it comes to aperture, are all measured in T-stops, and obviously T-stops is the transmitted light that hits the sensor, so it's the actual transmitted light, whereas an f-stop is the approximate light that will hit the sensor. So pretty much at the front of the lens is your f-stop. So, you know, an f2.8 isn't necessarily a t2.8 when it hits the sensor because of light diffracts off all the lenses, and you actually lose a little bit of light. So each lens can actually have a different light transmission when it hits the sensor. So if you are swapping out the 75 to 180 for the 28 to 75, they're both T2.9, which will give you the ability to keep the lighting situations the exact same, and also the camera settings as well. Also, I just want to jump in here and say thank you to each and every one of my subscribers and people who comment and like. I absolutely love you guys. Thank you for supporting me throughout my whole journey. I'm hoping to produce so much more in the future for you guys, you know, for motivation, for instructional stuff. So yeah, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and obviously give me a thumbs up. That would be amazing. Let's get back into the video. Now, one of the key characteristics of this lens is that they aren't super clean. They're not clinical lenses like a photography stills lens would be. They're generally quite sharp, wide open, and kind of lifeless in a way. Whereas these ones have character, and I love character. When it comes to cinematography, character is everything. Sometimes you don't want the image to be perfectly clean. You don't want there to be any lens flares. You don't want there to be any sort of artifacts when it comes to the bokeh or chromatic aberration, whereas these ones have so much more character and they're not super clean. But if you do obviously stop it down from T2.9 to T4 or T5.6, that's where things start to sharpen up. And if you do want a really clinically sharp image, then that's what you're going to be going for. So let's have a look at the image quality that comes out of this lens. So when it comes to chromatic aberration, what do we have with this lens? Now, when you are filming wide open at T2.9, there is some longitudinal chromatic aberration. And if you do stop it down to T4 or T5.6, that starts to go away a little bit, but it really depends on what you actually prefer. Now, from my observations, it does seem the 28 to 75 has less chromatic aberration than the 75 to 180. When they are both filming wide open, the 28 to 75 does control it a lot more. Now, this is filming with the 28 to 75 with the new Red Komodo X, and I can't notice any chromatic aberration on Karine here. And you can even notice in the trees, usually you will see chromatic aberration through the highlights of the trees, but I can't really see any here. So it does actually control it quite well. Now, if you did end up buying the 28 to 75 and also the 70 to 180 kit, you pretty much covered your whole range. This will give you so much more versatility. And the reason why this is priced how it is priced is because you're essentially getting, 3 or 4 lenses within one lens. So you can cover such a large range when it comes to those focal lengths. And you could easily film a whole project with even just one of these lenses. But if you have both of them, you've got so much versatility in the focal ranges. Right, so what are the differences between the 75 to 180 and the 28 to 75? Are they pretty much exactly the same when it comes to the image quality? So looking at the quality at T2.9 at 180 millimeters, it is relatively soft, wide open, but it's not too bad, but you can see chromatic aberration. If you stop it down to T4, it obviously does sharpen up and chromatic aberration is still there. But if we go to 75 millimeters, it does seem a little bit sharper, wide open at T2.9, and then stop it down to T4, it does sharpen up quite well. But this is where the 75 millimeters in the 28 to 75 is actually a little bit soft, wide open. You stop it down and it's very similar. But if you zoom out to 28 millimeters at T2.9 wide open, it is very sharp and high contrast. And obviously stopping it down to T4, very sharp once again. Now, these lenses are not light. They are a very solid metal build. And the great thing is that you can attach that lens support. And I absolutely recommend if you ever use these, put the lens support on and make sure you have a lens support bracket on there as well, because you don't want to put stress on your Sony E mount, your RF mount, whatever mount you're using. You don't want to be putting stress on it because that is not good. And if you do have a PL mount with the adapter, this also does have a lens support. So you can actually, put the lens support onto that adapter and just gives you extra support. And also what that lens support does as well is if you do have focus motors on here, the lens isn't actually going to move a little bit. Now, I know the Red Komodo actually has a little bit of movement in that RF mount. And if you don't actually have a lens support on there, your focus is actually going to be put off because it actually moves quite a lot. So having a lens support on there is extremely important, especially if you do have focus motors on there. So I think one of the great things about these cinema zoom lenses is that they barely have any focus breathing, which I know a lot of people hate focus breathing. And that is one thing that's plagued G-Master lenses for ages, is that they are horrible when it comes to focus breathing, mainly because they're stills lenses and they're built literally for stills photographers. And when people throw it into video mode, the lens elements are moving and so is the frame. But that's the great thing about a cinema zoom or most cinema lenses, you don't have focus breathing. So it's a major difference between these ones and photography stills lenses. Now, I know a lot of the newer Sony cameras have focus breathing compensation, which will obviously crop in and allow for that breathing, which will fix it. But if you do have a cinema lens or a cinema zoom lens, they're generally corrected inside here in the lens elements. So what's the distortion like on this lens? Now, when it comes to the distortion, the 28 to 75 does seem to have barrel distortion at 28 millimeters and maybe a very slight pin cushioning at 75 millimeters. And then if you go to 75 to 180, it's a very similar story. It seems to be barrel distortion at about 75 millimeters, but when you zoom into about 180, there doesn't seem to be too much noticeable distortion. So I think one of the most interesting things about these is that minimum focusing distance. Now, these aren't macro lenses, but it just gives you so much more versatility if you have the ability to get really nice and close. And if you do want to shoot people's eyes, then you can actually do that. But like I said, they're not macro lenses, so you can't get really, really close, but you can still get really intimate with the character and get nice and close. Now, it is a 77mm front filter thread, and if you do want to use matte boxes on here, it is recommended because, like I said, when it comes to that lens flare, it does flare actually quite a lot, but I love lens flares. It just gives it so much more character, so much more warmer vibe, more emotion when it comes to that video. That's just my personal preference. I love lens flares, and these ones do really well, but if you do want to put a matte box on there and cut those lens flare out, 77 front filter thread is really easy to come by. Now, in all honesty, if you are buying these lenses, get PL mount, because PL mounts, you can pretty much adapt to any camera, and it just gives you so much more versatility. Specifically, if you are hiring a camera for a different job, you can just literally attach this to that camera. Whereas if you end up buying this for a specific mount, it does lock you into that system sometimes. Now look, overall, I absolutely love these lenses, and I am buying a different cinema camera coming in the future. I haven't told anyone, so this may come as a surprise, but I will be able to attach these to that new cinema camera, and I am super excited to use these lenses with that camera, and you're going to be seeing a lot more with these lenses. So anyway, my friends, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up. That would be amazing. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and obviously the link will be in the description below if you do want to check these lenses out. They come recommended from me. I absolutely love these. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, let's get it.